welcome to another deep dive. You know, with the new Odyssey movie coming out in 2026,
Yeah.
I thought it'd be fun to kind of dig into the epic that kicked off the whole Trojan War saga,
Right?
Homer's The Iliad.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Great idea.
I'll be honest, I'm coming in pretty fresh on this one.
Okay.
I'm sure some of our listeners might be too.
Sure.
So for those of us who haven't exactly cracked open the Iliad lately, can you set the stage for us? What exactly is the Iliad?
What? Imagine a poem,
Okay.
but not like your typical sonnet or haiku or something.
Right.
This is an epic poem
Okay.
from ancient Greece.
Okay.
And it's all about the Trojan War.
Okay.
And it's attributed to this guy named Homer.
Uh-huh.
Although historians aren't even sure if it was one person or a whole group of poets just using that name.
Oh, wow. So we've got like a mystery author
Yeah.
from centuries ago.
A very, very long time ago.
That's already pretty intriguing.
Yeah. And this poem isn't just some dry historical account. It really dives into the heart of this conflict,
Okay.
focusing on this one period of the war that's dominated by the rage of Achilles.
Achilles the warrior.
Yes.
I feel like I've heard that name.
Oh, yeah. He's like the Greek warrior.
Okay.
Almost like a demigod.
Okay.
But here's the twist.
Okay.
He's got this massive ego.
Okay.
And when Agamemnon, the leader of the Greeks, disrespects him,
Uh-huh.
Achilles just walks out
Yo.
in the middle of a war.
Yeah, that's a pretty bold move.
Huge consequences.
Right.
The Greeks start losing badly without Achilles.
Makes sense.
So it's like this one act of rage just sets off this whole chain of events that really makes you think about how our emotions can have these ripple effects we don't even anticipate.
Yeah, so it's like a cautionary tale wrapped up in an epic war story.
Absolutely. And beyond Achilles,
Okay.
there's this whole cast of characters you're going to get caught up in.
Oh.
Like Hector, the Trojan prince, is actually one of the most likable guys in the whole story,
Interesting.
even though he's on the quote-unquote enemy side.
So, like, the Iliad might challenge our black and white thinking about
Right.
good guys and bad guys a little bit.
You're already picking up on it.
And then,
You think they can just-
even more wild,
Yeah.
you've got the Olympian gods
Oh, yeah.
taking sides.
That was like they're placing bets on the human.
Wait, so the gods are involved
Oh, yeah.
directly in this war.
Imagine Zeus throwing lightning bolts
Wow.
to help one side, or Athena whispering battle tactics in someone's ear.
So then do these characters even have free will?
Right.
Or are they just pawns in some divine game?
Exactly.
That's a heavy question.
Big question.
Especially considering all these battles sound brutal.
Yeah.
Like, what's it like when Homer describes the fighting?
Hold on tight because he gets graphic.
Okay.
We're talking clashing bronze. The screams of wounded soldiers, the full horror of hand-to-hand combat.
So not for the faint of heart.
Not for the faint of heart, but it definitely pulls you into the intensity of the war.
Wow, are there any battles that stand out as particularly memorable?
Oh, yeah. You've got the duel between Paris,
Yep.
the guy who started the whole war by stealing Helen,
Right.
and Menelaus, her original husband.
Okay.
Then there's Diomedes, this one Greek warrior who goes on a rampage.
Uh-huh.
And he even manages to wound the gods Ares and Aphrodite.
Even the gods bleed.
Even the gods bleed.
Yeah, that's pretty intense.
It highlights that everyone is vulnerable in war, even those who seem invincible.
Right.
But I think what really sticks with you is the constant presence of death.
Yeah.
Like it hangs over every scene, every character.
Wow.
Homer really drives home that life, even for these heroes, is fleeting and precious.
That's a powerful message, especially coming from such an ancient text.
Right.
So where does the story go from there? I feel this sense of impending doom.
Yeah.
It feels like something big is about to happen.
You're right on the mark. Remember Patroclus?
Achilles' close friend.
Yeah. He sees the Greeks struggling, and he decides to wear Achilles' armor and lead his warriors into battle.
That sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It is. Patroclus is a brave fighter.
Yeah.
But he's no Achilles.
Right.
Hector the Trojan prince ends up killing him in the fighting.
Oh, man. I can only imagine how Achilles reacts to that news.
Well, up until this point, Achilles has been sulking in his tent, furious at Agamemnon.
Yeah.
But Patroclus' death is a turning point. Grief turns into this white-hot rage.
Right.
And that's what finally drags him back onto the battlefield.
Okay, so after all that buildup,
Yeah.
Achilles is finally ready to fight again. This has to be the epic showdown, right?
It is Achilles fueled by revenge.
Yeah.
Is absolutely terrifying.
Okay.
He cuts through the Trojan army like a hot knife through butter.
Wow.
And his ultimate target, Hector.
Yeah.
The man who killed Patroclus.
I mean, this is going to be one of the most famous duels in literature.
It's legendary. What's it like?
These two greatest warriors going at it with everything they've got.
Wow.
But remember, Achilles is practically superhuman.
Right.
It's a brutal, tragic fight
Yeah.
that ends predictably with Hector's death.
So Achilles gets his revenge.
He does.
But something tells me this victory isn't as sweet as he imagined.
You're absolutely right. He's won, but at what cost?
Yeah.
He's lost a part of himself in this cycle of rage and violence.
Right.
And it makes you think, even in victory, can we truly escape the consequences of our actions?
That's a profound question, and it makes me wonder what happens next. Does the poem just end with Hector dead?
Well, there's more.
Okay.
And this is where the Iliad gets even more interesting. It doesn't just focus on these grand battles.
Right.
It zooms in on these quiet human moments that are happening amidst all the chaos.
Oh, so we get a glimpse of the character's vulnerability after all that bloodshed.
One of the most powerful scenes is Hector's farewell to his wife,
Okay.
Andromache,
Uh-huh.
and their baby son.
Oh, it's heartbreaking. You see this warrior who has been so fearless in battle
Yeah.
completely break down as he accepts his own mortality.
Wow.
It's a reminder that even the strongest among us have fears and loves
Right.
that go beyond the battlefield.
That scene must really stay with you.
Yeah.
Are there other moments where this more human,
Yeah.
emotional side comes through?
Definitely later on, Priam, the king of Troy,
Mm-hmm.
goes to Achilles to beg for his son Hector's body.
Oh, wow.
And surprisingly, Achilles shows compassion.
Really?
He allows Priam to take Hector back for a proper burial.
After all that anger and violence, a flicker of humanity.
And there's another interesting detail.
Like,
Homer describes this incredible shield that Achilles has. It's a
Oh,
masterpiece with
yeah.
scenes of peace and war, everyday life, love, loss. Everything.
everything.
It hints at this whole world. Beyond the conflict, a world Achilles, blinded by rage, has almost forgotten.
So it's like the shield is a symbol of the life he could have had, the life he's sacrificing for revenge.
You've hit the nail on the head. So now we come to the ending of the Iliad.
Okay.
It doesn't actually show the fall of Troy,
Okay.
which is what most people expect.
Right.
Instead, it ends with Hector's body being returned and this sense of sorrow,
Uh-huh.
but also acceptance.
That sounds like a bittersweet ending.
It is, but it also makes you think about the poem's deeper meaning,
Right.
which is what we'll unpack in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, I'm still processing all that action and emotion.
Yeah.
So we've got this epic story,
Right.
larger-than-life characters.
Uh-huh.
But what about the meaning of it all?
Right.
What's the Iliad actually trying to say?
Well, that's what's so fascinating about this poem.
Okay.
It's open to so many different interpretations. You know, what resonated with an audience thousands of years ago might hit us totally differently today.
So how do we even start to unravel all those different layers?
Mm.
Where should we look for clues?
Well, a good place to start is with those big themes that keep popping up.
Okay.
We've already talked about Achilles and his rage, but it goes deeper than just a hot-headed warrior.
Right. It seems like his anger had this ripple effect impacting everyone around him.
Exactly. Think about it. He's wronged. His best friend is killed.
Uh-huh.
So his rage is understandable,
Right.
but it consumes him,
Yeah.
drives him to do some pretty brutal things.
Mm-hmm.
By the end, he gets his revenge,
Yeah.
but he's empty, isolated. It makes you wonder if it was even worth it.
It's like the poem is warning us about letting our emotions control us,
Yeah.
especially anger.
That's a reading that's relevant no matter what century you're in.
Right.
We still see anger and hatred leading to destruction,
Uh-huh.
both in our personal lives and, on a global scale.
Absolutely.
The Iliad doesn't give us easy answers,
Yeah.
but it forces us to confront the consequences of those powerful emotions.
You also mentioned fate earlier.
Right.
How does that play into this story? It seemed like the gods had a hand in everything.
That's where things get really complex. The gods are constantly meddling,
Yeah.
like they're following some predetermined script.
Uh-huh.
And you see this in the prophecies that are scattered throughout the poem.
Okay.
Achilles knows, for example, that he'll die young if he fights at Troy.
Right.
Even the gods seem bound by fate, unable to change the course of events.
So that's a pretty bleak outlook. If everything is predetermined, what's the point of even trying?
That's the big debate.
Yeah.
Some people read the Iliad as a message of resignation, just accepting whatever fate throws your way.
Right.
But others argue it's more about how we respond to our fate, even if we can't control the big picture.
So even if we can't escape destiny,
Yeah.
we still have choices in how we face it.
Exactly. Look at Hector. He knows he's going to die fighting Achilles.
Right.
But he faces it with courage and honor. He fights for his city, his family, his beliefs.
Yeah.
It's not about winning or losing. It's about how you play the game, even when you know the odds are stacked against you.
That's actually pretty inspiring, making the most of your time, even when facing impossible odds.
And it brings us to another crucial aspect of the Iliad.
Okay.
The beauty and fragility of life.
Yeah.
In the middle of all this violence and death,
Uh-huh.
Homer shows us these moments of tenderness,
Okay.
love, compassion.
Like Hector's farewell to his family.
Exactly.
That scene was heartbreaking.
Or think about Achilles weeping with Priam over Hector's body.
Right.
These moments remind us that even in the darkest times, humanity persists.
Yeah.
It's a reminder to hold on to those connections,
Yeah.
those moments of grace.
Right.
Because life is precious and fleeting.
It's amazing how the Iliad can take you from this epic battle scene
Right.
to a deeply personal, emotional moment in the blink of an eye.
Yeah.
It's like an emotional roller coaster. But besides the story itself,
Uh-huh.
how does Homer tell it?
Right.
What makes his style so unique?
His use of language is incredible. Even in translation, you can feel the clash of swords, hear the cries of the warriors.
Wow.
He uses these extended similes,
Yeah.
comparing a warrior's charge to a lion pouncing on its prey, or grief to a raging storm.
It's like those comparisons help us feel the emotions,
Exactly.
not just read about them.
And he uses repetition
Okay.
in a way that's both rhythmic and meaningful. Think about epithets like swift-footed Achilles or rosy-fingered Dawn.
Yeah.
They create this musicality, but also emphasize key aspects of the characters or the setting.
Each repetition is like adding another layer of meaning,
Yeah.
another brushstroke to the portrait.
Precisely. And then there's his portrayal of the gods, which is really interesting.
Right.
Sometimes they're these majestic figures controlling fate. Other times they're squabbling amongst themselves, acting out of jealousy or spite.
Right.
Almost like humans.
It reminds me of that scene where Hephaestus, the god of fire, has to break up a fight between Zeus and Hera.
Exactly. It makes you wonder how the ancient Greeks really viewed their gods. It wasn't just blind faith.
Right.
There's humor, even critique, woven into their portrayal. The gods are powerful, but they're not perfect.
It's almost like Homer is subtly challenging the traditional view of the divine,
Right.
showing us that even gods have their flaws. That's pretty bold.
It definitely suggests a more nuanced view of the relationship between humans and the divine,
Right.
something that scholars are still debating today.
It's incredible that a poem written thousands of years ago can still spark these kinds of conversations.
Right.
Speaking of influence,
Yeah.
how has the Iliad impacted later works of art and literature?
I mean, its influence is massive.
Okay.
It's been a source of inspiration for countless writers, artists, musicians across centuries. Virgil's Aeneid, for example, is basically a sequel to the Iliad,
Okay.
continuing the story of the Trojan War.
So it's like the Iliad provided a blueprint for epic storytelling.
In a way, yes. Wow. And its echoes are everywhere.
Okay.
Shakespeare's plays, Tennyson's poetry, even James Joyce drew inspiration from the Iliad.
Wow.
It's also inspired countless paintings, sculptures, operas.
Right.
Those scenes with their intense emotions and vivid imagery, they just beg to be reinterpreted in different forms.
It speaks to the power of Homer's storytelling, that it can resonate so deeply with artists even today.
Yeah.
It's a story that transcends time and culture. But what about its impact on our culture more broadly? How do we see its influence in everyday life?
The Iliad has shaped our understanding of heroism, of war, of what it means to be human. It's giving us these iconic characters like Achilles, Hector, Helen,
Right.
whose names are instantly recognizable, even if you've never read the poem.
Even someone who hasn't cracked open. The Iliad has probably heard of Achilles' heel or the Trojan horse.
Exactly. Those stories, those themes of anger, fate, honor, glory,
Yeah.
they're woven into our culture, and that's why it's important to keep revisiting these classic works.
Right.
They hold up a mirror to ourselves. Our values, our place in the world.
Mm-hmm.
They remind us that the human experience, for all its complexities,
Yeah.
is something that unites us across time.
It's making me even more excited for the new Odyssey movie.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm just starting to understand the depth and richness of this world.
I'm sure the film will draw heavily from the Iliad.
Oh, yeah.
As the two stories are deeply connected, they're part of this larger epic cycle.
Oh, wow.
Complete narrative arc.
Okay.
Spanning the war and its aftermath.
It's like one giant interconnected story universe.
Right.
I love it. This deep dive has been truly eye-opening.
Yeah.
I feel like I have a much better grasp of the Iliad and its impact.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. And as we wrap up this part of our conversation,
Okay.
I want to leave you with this thought.
Okay.
We've talked about these various interpretations of the Iliad,
Right.
but ultimately the meaning is something each reader discovers for themselves.
Yeah. I love that idea that, like, the meaning isn't fixed. It's something that unfolds differently for each reader.
Mm.
It makes me think about the ending of the Iliad. I have to admit, it wasn't what I was expecting.
Right.
You know?
What's fascinating is how it subverts, like, the typical hero's journey.
Yeah.
We don't see the Greeks storming Troy.
Right.
No triumphant victory celebration.
Right.
Instead, we get this quiet, somber ending with Priam
Yeah.
carrying Hector's body back to Troy.
It definitely challenges our assumptions about what an epic poem should be.
Right.
There's no glorification of war
Right.
or conquest.
No.
It's almost like Homer is forcing us to sit with the aftermath,
Right.
the cost of all that conflict.
Exactly. It's easy to get swept up in the excitement of the battles,
Yeah.
the larger-than-life heroes.
Right.
But the Iliad doesn't let us off the hook.
Right.
It confronts us with the grief,
Yeah.
the loss, the enduring scars that war leaves behind.
It's a reminder that victory often comes at a steep price, a price that sometimes isn't fully understood until long after the fighting is over.
And that's what makes the Iliad so relevant even today.
Yeah.
We live in a world where violence is all too common.
Right.
This poem offers us a way to process those experiences, to grapple with the complexities of war
Yeah.
and its impact on us,
Oh, yeah.
both individually and collectively.
It's like a mirror reflecting our own struggles with anger loss and the search for meaning in the face of suffering.
Precisely, and even though it was written thousands of years ago, it speaks to something timeless about the human condition. What's also interesting is that even though the Iliad focuses on these legendary heroes and gods,
Yeah.
we still get glimpses of the everyday people caught
Yeah.
in the crossfire.
Like Hector's wife,
Right.
Andromache, and their baby.
Oh.
It's impossible not to feel for them knowing what's coming.
That scene with Hector saying goodbye to his family
Right.
humanizes the conflict in a way that's just so powerful.
Yeah.
It reminds us that war isn't just about abstract battles or political agendas.
Right.
It's about real people
Yeah.
whose lives are shattered by violence.
It's a perspective we often lose sight of, especially when we're looking back at historical events.
And I think that's one of the most important takeaways from the Iliad.
Okay.
It encourages us to look beyond the surface, beyond the quote-unquote official narrative,
Yeah.
and see the human faces,
Right.
the individual stories behind the grand sweep of history.
So as we wrap up our deep dive, what would you say are some of the most enduring lessons that the Iliad offers us even today?
One of the biggest and perhaps most timely is the destructive nature of anger and the need for reconciliation.
Yeah.
You know, Achilles' rage, while understandable,
Yeah.
ultimately leads to immense suffering.
Right.
It's a reminder that we have to find ways to break free from these cycles of violence and revenge,
Yeah.
both on a personal and a global scale.
That's a message we desperately need to hear in our current world.
Absolutely. I also think the Iliad teaches us about empathy and compassion. Even in the midst of war, those moments of human connection shine through Priam and Achilles sharing their grief,
Right.
Hector's tenderness with his family. It reminds us that even amidst conflict,
Yeah.
we can find common ground, recognize our shared humanity.
It's a reminder that beneath all the anger and division, we're all connected in ways we sometimes forget.
And finally, I think the Iliad teaches us about the beauty and fragility of life itself.
Yeah.
The poem is filled with these vivid descriptions of both the glory and the horror of war.
Right.
It reminds us that life is precious and we should cherish every moment,
Yeah.
live it to the fullest, even in the face of uncertainty and loss.
That's a message that resonates across centuries, reminding us that some things about the human experience are truly universal.
Exactly. The ancient Greeks were keenly aware of the fleeting nature of life.
Yeah.
And I think the Iliad invites us to embrace that awareness as well.
This deep dive has been an incredible journey. I feel like we've only scratched the surface of this epic poem,
Yeah.
but what a powerful and thought-provoking surface it is.
There's always more to discover with the Iliad. It's a work that rewards rereading reflection. And I hope our conversation has inspired you to delve deeper into its layers.
I know, I'm adding it to my reading list for sure. And for our listeners, I hope this deep dive has given you a taste of the richness and complexity of the Iliad. It's a timeless masterpiece that continues to offer profound insights into the human condition, challenges us to think critically, and ultimately reminds us of our shared humanity.
So as you go forth into the world, remember the lessons of the Iliad, seek reconciliation, embrace empathy, and cherish the precious gift of life.
And with that, we conclude our deep dive into the world of Homer's The Iliad. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.